about Freud's analysis of it too. The title of the book is Memoirs of My Nervous Illness. I've said this to you guys before, but I'll just say it again. The literature of madness is pricelessly valuable. What it consists of are the first-person writings of people who have passed through the greatest psychological catastrophes that can exist in human life. This is one of the great classics, the Memoirs of My Nervous Illness from Schreber. And Freud got hold of it and offered a speculative interpretation. I'm not going to talk about that right now, but I will summarize it next time maybe, and we'll look at it. And then there's been further research into it. Let me just tell you about the memoir itself, though, and the story that it unfolds. Daniel Paul Schreber, at the time of his greatest crisis, its commencement, really, would have been maybe 35, 40 years old. He was a judge, actually, in Germany in the late 19th century, early 20th, okay? He was married, no children. What else do you need to know about him? Just that. You know, he was brilliant, a brilliant legal mind, a practicing judge elected to his position, and he went off the deep end. And it was his way of trying to contend with the experience of going off the deep end to write the book that is his memoir of his so-called nervous illness. And it's an amazing, amazing book. It's huge, too. It's hundreds of pages long. Let me just tell you a little bit about what it's like. If you read it, it starts out seemingly very coherent, very well written. He addresses the reader. I can't remember the details. I'll try to paraphrase it a little bit. Dear reader, you know, in the following manuscript, I hope to share with you experiences that I have undergone that have great significance, not only for me, but for you and for the world at large, for society as a whole, to take account of. It's like that. That's how it starts. And it makes sense. You don't know what the message is going to be that he's going to tell you. But it's quite logical, it's written well, you don't think it's really crazy. But then very slowly, as you read through this progression of sentences, it starts getting a little weird, a little odder, a little weirder and weirder, and pretty soon you realize, oh my God, this guy is off the deep end completely. Here's what he tells of the beginning of his journey into madness. It all started one fine morning as he woke up from a deep sleep, and a thought came into his mind. So imagine this married judge with no children, waking up from a sleep. He opens his eyes, and the following thought then occurs. The thought was, what an absolutely delightful thing it would be, these are his words, to succumb to sexual intercourse as a woman. That's it. Okay, just that, all by itself. What a delightful thing, what a delicious, wonderful thing it would be to succumb to sexual intercourse as a woman. Now here's the problem. He looked at the thought that had run through his mind, and he knew that was not his thought. Whose thought was it? It was not a thought that Daniel Paul Schreber would have. He doesn't have such thoughts as that. This thought comes from something or somewhere, someone. Who put that thought in his mind? He immediately went into a paranoid state that somebody had injected this thought into his brain and caused him to have it. It was not his thought. So the crisis begins with an intrusion, what phenomenologically felt to him like an intrusion by some unknown force from the external world into the workings of his own inner self, producing a foreign thought that would never have emerged from the personality or background of Daniel Paul Schreber. How delightful it would be to succumb to sexual intercourse as a woman. Now, Schreber had been seeing a psychiatrist, somebody by the name of Flechsig, F-L-E-C-H-S-I-G, at the time. He was not palpably, diagnostically mad or anything, but he'd been going through changes and felt like he was losing weight and kind of scary insecurity feelings. But this is the first outbreak of what you would really want to say is true madness is in the form of this thought that came to him. The Flechsig he'd been seeing. And as he lay there in bed, mulling over, what's this thought doing in my brain? Where did it come from? Who put it there? The rage starts to come. Who's messing with me? Who's monkeying with my mind? Then it came to him what it was. Oh, it's Flechsig. Flechsig lived in a distant city. He would travel to see him. But Flechsig must be doing some kind of strange telepathic hypnosis experiments. He must be having a laboratory performing hypnotic telepathy and producing post-hypnotic suggestions in Schreber and injecting and planting this thought that that was it. And that it's part of a conspiracy Flechsig's involved in to basically feminize Schreber, to take him and make him have the thoughts of a woman. And this was the beginning of a kind of expanding wave of delusional paranoia on Schreber's part, where he came to the idea that that's not only Flechsig. Flechsig is just the earthly representative of an even more terrible persecutor. It was God himself. And that God, with the aid of Flechsig as his earthly representative, was actually conspiring and bringing about changes that were going to convert Schreber from a man to a woman. That his body and his mind and his soul were going to be remade over into a woman. And that when that terrible infernal work was completed, Schreber's own soul as an individual existing in his own right will be murdered. This is a process of soul murder to convert him into a woman. That's it. How is this taking place? According to Schreber, and he gives vast detail in his Memoirs of My Nervous Illness, God, wherever he is at the center, pinnacle of the universe, sends these rays out. And these rays come down from heaven and circle around the earth and then concentrate and kind of focus into a beam and go zapping into Schreber's body and around his body and swirling around him. And they produce these physical and mental changes, converting him into a woman. And this idea of how wonderful it would be to succumb to sexual intercourse as a woman, that's part of it. And the term he uses for the intervention by God is miracles. The miracles. These are the miracles are supernatural interventions. They are persecutory. Usually we think of miracles as something good that Jesus did or something. This is not it. These are persecutory miracles produced by the supernatural intervention of God to convert him into a woman. And he became convinced that his breasts were growing and that his normal body, being kind of straight, was becoming curvaceous, and his thoughts were becoming more and more feminine, more and more oriented toward the sexuality of women. And so the Memoirs of My Nervous Illness is a kind of chronicle of his years-long battle to prevent the effort from succeeding to turn him into a woman in the first place, okay? Isn't that something? Now, I'm not going to go into the details of it right now, but this is challenging looking at a thing like this and asking the question, what could be the subjective truth that could be carried by a crazy-sounding thing like this? It turns out there's an amazing story, but I'll give it to you next time. Let's stop there today.